Well, it's nice to see you. Thank you for coming. I appreciate that opportunity. Isn't it always inspirational to be in a bookstore? You know, I'm just looking around thinking, oh, I'd like to read that and the other. But my name is Jim Gray. I know many of you. Some of you I don't. But it's nice to be able to share some thoughts. Some of you may know that I've been a judge here in Orange County, California for 25 years on the bench. Prior to that, I was a federal prosecutor, and before that, I was a Navy JAG attorney. I was in the Peace Corps in Costa Rica. So I've, as some of my supposed friends say, I've had a lot of trouble holding a job, and I keep moving around from one to another. But it has given me some insights. And one of the insights I expect that you share, like me, that we're concerned about the direction of our country, that I am deeply concerned about where our country is going, where we are, and the direction that we're headed. And I've tried to do what I can as an individual to try to turn our ship, to change our direction, because a lot of these issues just really are not that hard. They're just not that hard. And in fact, I'm tremendously optimistic even in these rather difficult times, because these problems that we're facing are not that difficult. Really, all the things we need to do is to go back to being Americans, to go back and be willing to work, to roll up our sleeves, to stop relying upon government, and to do it, in effect, the way we've always done it. Namely, we are the ones that will progress. We don't need government. We really don't want government to be involved. So what do? Well, we start focusing on basics. And one of the basics is that you get more of what you subsidize and less of what you tax. And so in today's welfare society, guess what we have? We're subsidizing being needy. And so naturally, people try to look as needy as they can in order to get more subsidies. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't try to help those that are downtrodden. We certainly know there's some mentally ill people in our society, some people that really need some assistance. But the difference is we do it because we want to, not because we have to. And we'll be able to come back and recapture what has made us great in the first place. So, as some of you know, I ran for office a couple of times. The last time was as a libertarian. I ran for the United States Senate back in 2004, not because I thought I would win, because I knew that wasn't going to happen, but because I wanted to help change the direction that we were going. And it just didn't work for one reason or another. So thereafter, I thought, well, what can I do now? I'm going to try to write a weekly column in a local paper and the Daily Pilot, which is sent around with the Los Angeles Times here in Orange County and a couple of cities, Newport Beach and Costa Mesa, just to try to be a part of the discussion, to galvanize some discussion, and it's been fairly successful, and it's really heartening to hear different responses to those columns. But then I took some of the more substantive columns and turned them into a book, and that's why we're here tonight, Voter's Handbook, Effective Solutions to America's Problems. And I don't know how many of you have read these already, but it's not long. It talks about numbers of different issues. It begins with the basics, like we've discussed already, going back to less intrusive, less expensive government, allowing people to work. You know, the more regulations we have, you may not be aware of this, but the cost of a new house in Orange County or pretty much anywhere else in California or around the country, about 30% of the cost of a new house is spent trying to comply with various government regulations. If you are going to go to many cities in the state and you want to put in a new water heater, for heaven's sake, it's going to cost you about $50 just to get the approval, the licensing from the city. Well, that's wasted money. The city should not be in the water heater oversight department. They should go with people that are bonded. And if you're a bonded company, you're going to be able to make sure that the water heater is installed correctly. And you don't have to do all of that. But of course, anyone trying to put on a new roof or get a new water heater or whatever, you have nowhere to go. You have to go to the city. You have to pay whatever they ask. You have to wait for their inspectors to come out. You have no options, and it really increases the costs of houses. Now, if we didn't have that problem, do you think that houses would be built on a foundation of sand, or they wouldn't use rebar or something like that? Of course not, because we have the civil justice system. And if it isn't what it's meant to be, if you don't fulfill your warranty, you can bring a lawsuit to judges like me, and you'll get your redress. And if they're bonded, they'll be able to pay anyway. And the bonding company, I assure you, will make full certain that you're going to build your house correctly. So we have to get away from so much government intrusion. Do we need government? Absolutely. We know that. You know, libertarians, others realize. But the federal government is really important, to have a strong military, to have a police force, to have a judiciary, to enforce contracts, things like that. But if you look at the 9th and 10th Amendments to the United States Supreme Court, it says that unless these various powers are given to the federal government, they're reserved for the states, they're reserved for the people. But we have an enormous bureaucracy today. And what happens in a bureaucracy, big government, it becomes bigger and bigger, basically by making larger government. So let's talk about one thing right now, and that is the education system in the state of California. And if you look, there are more statutes. The statutes for the education code are the largest of any we have in the state of California. We have now worked up an enormous bureaucracy in Sacramento to oversee the educational system in our state. And of course then, these people are required to put in all of this work and all of these papers and all of these reports to the state government. And then of course the state has to justify its existence. So they say, no, I'm sorry, this one wasn't done correctly. You have to do it more that way. They justify their existence. So I was talking one time to Milton Friedman. What a wonderful opportunity to be able to do that. And we're actually talking about drug policy, and we were there for a seminar, but at a recess, he was talking about what he called school vouchers, choice, competition in education. And I came up to him and said, Dr. Friedman, you know, I'm a product of public schools. I believe in public education, and I really do not want to undercut our system of education, of public education in California. And he said, Jim, let me ask you two questions. Number one, if you are the parent of a college-age student, what country in the world do you want your child to go to get the best education that he or she can? And I said, I'm not sure, but probably the United States of America. And he said, I think you're right. Second question is, if you are the parent of a high school-age child, what country in the world do you want your child to go to get the best education that he or she can? And I said, I'm not sure, but probably not the United States of America. And he said, you're right again. What's the difference? Because in college we have competition, and in high schools we don't. You think about that. In college we have competition, and in high schools we don't. And if you take it a step further, in government schools, which is what Milton Friedman called them, public schools, government schools, they're funded differently. They're funded from the top down. That means that the money comes from on high, from the government, to the administrators, and that's where the money stays. And soon, the better teachers see, well, wait a minute, I want to get an advance in salary. I'm going to become an administrator also. So the administration gets bigger and bigger. And only does it trickle down to the teachers and to the educational process. As a result, you're top-heavy in education. You have all of this paperwork being shuffled back and forth, and the students do not get the benefit. But in any other consumer-related organization, what happens? It's funded from the bottom up. It's funded from the consumers. So if you go to a market that doesn't serve you, you go to a different market. And either what happens with that first market, they either figure out what's going on and give a better product, or they go out of business, or somebody else buys them, takes them over, and they work better. It's the same thing with schools.